Bickley and Marte mornings. Arizona sports. The local sports leader. Bickley Blast.
The Diamondbacks ended up in the wrong city over the weekend. They ended up in adversity. They were swept for the first time since April. They lost twice in extra innings. They played suspect defense. They were abused on the base paths by a Tampa team that gave the Diamondbacks a taste of their own chaos, stealing 13 bases in one series. And wait, there's more. Their two pitchers, best pitchers, weren't very good. And if that weren't bad enough, Ketel Marte is injured again. In fact, somebody needs to explain how Marte could twice return too early from an injured ankle, and if it was bad enough to make him crumple to the ground on his first swing from the left side of the plate, then you really wonder how this could have happened and why this team didn't take the opportunity to give him a lengthy rest when it happened the first time. Now, I believe there are two reasons for this recklessness. Number one, the Diamondbacks spent months hanging by their fingernails and they worried about losing their grip. And number two, this is a user-friendly organization that knows how important recognition and stardom is to Marte and how important his drive for the National League MVP was to him. Either way, there's a fear now that it's all catching up to the Diamondbacks. The key injuries on offense and the missing gloves on defense, and you really wonder how much more this team can take between the ears and between the lines. All right, today's Bickley Blast brought to you by my great friends at Chapman BMW, who make luxury attainable. Find them online at chapmanbmw.com.
There's some really good moments and some really identifiable moments where we got to improve and continue to play D-back type of baseball. I got to bridge over to how proud I am of this team, right? We're losing and we're getting no hit, and all of a sudden we're back in the game and we force extra innings. And we fought hard. We fought really hard. So there's no quitting this team. They're hungry, and that's what I'm going to focus on as we travel down to Miami.
Now, that, of course, is Torey Lovullo, and if you were listening to this program at the end of last week, you know that I was a little befuddled by the amount of concern that prefaced this road trip for a team that was smoking hot.
Derek Hall, remember, came on, sort of was with concern in his voice on the road trip. You're right.
He used the words haunting and daunting, right? And Torey Lovullo talked about what a tough road trip this is going to be and how these are really hard places to play. And in my brain, I thought, okay, look, Tampa's a good organization, but they're not a great team this year. And really, the Marlins, I think we saw what Torey was talking about in terms of that ballpark and how that ballpark got in this team's head, the angles of the outfield, that weird artificial turf with all that crushed rubber. Every time a ball bounces, you see a cloud of it come up, right?
Yeah, on Saturday, there was the fly ball hit towards right field. Randall Grichuk's pretty much back at the warning track, looks up and the ball's not there anymore. It was the 9th time that a ball has gone up in the rings at Tropicana Field and has not come down. It was the 3rd time ever on Ring B because there's like Ring A and Ring C. So you can see how this plays a little bit weird. In fact, the nugget that Steve Berthiaume had on the show, or on the game, yesterday, is that Tampa's manager went over and talked to the umpires before the game, and the umpire asked Cash about the specific rules beforehand, and Cash was like, I don't know, I've never seen it before. Because that was the last time it had happened was 2008 when the ball got stuck up there. So it's a weird place, but to your point, just like the mental makeup of the team and where it was at, the airs on Friday just spoke to something that wasn't quite connected where it should be.
Yeah. And defensively at catcher, they've got issues. Jose Herrera and this young Del Castillo kid, I mean, they're doing their best, but defensively, they're both minus defenders. Let's be honest here. And for Tampa to get on the base paths and just double steal at will, take bases at will, do you know how emasculating that has to be, especially when that's the Diamondbacks calling card, right? Creating chaos, that's what they do. And it was being done to them. There was a play when we thought the Trop was coming into play again, when Merrill Kelly tried to feel that little short nubber, and he threw the ball into right field. It bounced off the screen, the netting, and then the runner was awarded third base. And at the time, people were like, what happened here?
Josh Bell apparently was in the way. Obstruction was later ruled. I respected that from Merrill Kelly. He's like, there's 2 outs. Screw it. I'm going to throw this ball to try to save the run. And if I don't, I don't care because this outing sucks and I'm pissed. I kind of loved it. The audacity of it was something worth applauding. The execution.
Something worth not applauding.
Desiring a bit more there.
Yeah.
To the point on the catchers, the story Alex Weiner has on his story, or the stat that he has in his story on ArizonaSports.com right now, those two, Jose Herrera and Adrian Del Castillo, 1 for 24 this year in throwing out base stealers this year. So when those two are back there, and Gabriel Moreno is not back there, you can run. Now, fortunately, I looked this up. Miami runs a bit, but they're 12th in steals. Tampa's a top 5 team in the league this year, but that's where you worry with specific matchups right now, with how long Gabby is going to be out, when teams are going to be able to really take advantage of this. Because guess what? If teams weren't aware, now they surely are. And they're looking at technique. They're looking at all the takes in there, and it's going to be really on the pitchers. I think it was Merrill earlier in the game, if I remember correctly, who threw to first a couple of times and nearly got a guy. And that's the type of protection that you're going to really need there. Boston is 6th in steals. They're at 119. That's who the D-backs play later this week after Miami, who is 12th. They have 92 steals, which is more than the D-backs, so they run a fair bit as well. Tampa is 4th. They play Milwaukee later this month, who has 159 steals. They're in 3rd. Right. Now this talking point, which we never would have if Gabby Moreno is catcher, now we're all watching. We're all going to be watching today and for the rest of the year until Gabby's back.
You're so right about that, because if the book wasn't out before, it's certainly out now. And teams are going to run and run and run if they get the chance on this Diamondbacks defense. We talk about Josh Bell briefly in the obstruction call. Josh Bell at times gets subbed for defensive purposes late in the game with Kevin Newman, and it's just a concession that it's a reminder that Christian Walker is not here. And the defensive lapses that let them down on Friday, you just wonder. What I wonder with this team, because I hear Torey going out of his way to say, look, I'm going to focus on these comebacks that we did. And those comebacks are very impressive. And Corbin Carroll starting to get kind of hot. That's very, 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 that's a very, very good sign and very much needed at this point in time. But I just wonder psychologically how much more this team can take before they begin to crack a little bit. Because it felt like they cracked a little bit this weekend, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the errors thing especially. They had, I think, 2 errors since the All-Star break, and now they've sort of collapsed. And we were kind of blinded by Josh Bell and Del Castillo hitting these dramatic home runs that we don't know it is a two-way game.
Yes.
And their defense, you're losing a ton with Christian Walker and with Gabby Moreno.
Yes, you are. Well, that's correct. A ton. And that resurfaced over the weekend.
And even at the plate, like this is something where I was on Wolf and Luke filling in and joining Luke Lipinski last week on that show.
I'm sorry.
And something that I was kind of talking about a little bit. He's going to get you back. You know he always does. We talked a lot of mess about you during that show.
No.
Like it was a ton. Whenever we do these shows and you're not over there, because for longtime listeners not aware, the Rundown with Luke Lipinski, rest in peace, a beautiful radio show that once existed, does not anymore. Jarrett Carlin ran the board for it. I would be over there working in the web department, and Luke or Jarrett would just be like, hey, you want to come on the radio tonight? That was kind of the attitude of the show or whatever. So we developed a bond and a shared hatred for Jarrett Carlin that still resides to this day. Offensively, though, last week, Josh Bell, 3 for 22. Adrian Del Castillo, 2 for 17. Like I was on that show and we were like, oh man, like is Josh Bell like your first baseman next year? Do you feel better about like letting Christian Walker go? And then you see one of these weeks and you're like, oh yeah, Christian Walker's really, really good and really, really consistent at baseball. It's easy to get lost in that sometimes. Even when you see Bell go on a heater like he did when he got here.
Even on Saturday, you saw a Geraldo Perdomo glitch in the field.
Sure.
On that ground ball where the guy running to second kind of distracted him and he didn't throw the ball, and it was like, they just felt off.
Geraldo Perdomo.
The phenomenon that exists a lot, and we saw it, like the infamous one is when the Warriors chased 73 wins. They wanted to get it, and then the postseason we saw them kind of wear down. That kind of looked like a bit of mental fatigue to me. This huge push that they made, I think that it really did affect them, at least for this series, and you hope that now they are able to regroup and get back to what they were doing before, because they were playing at such a high level, playing in all these really intense, dramatic games. The amount of bullpen miscues, the amount of answer backs that were needed, that can wear you down over time, and I think that's ultimately what we saw in those games.
Thanks for watching Bickley and Murata. Click to see the latest Bickley Blast and hit the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.